Intersection Magazine Podcast.
Welcome to Intersection Magazine Podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about some of the complexities of intellectual property and technology after a question that was asked by a member of the Founders Lounge in Uganda. And what I've done is I've created a bit of what I think is a set of useful tools that will define some of the knowledge that I think exists in this area, in intellectual property in general and copyrights, as well as created or shared some information from a film that I believe captures this idea very well. So that's what we're presenting right now, just parts of that film. It's a Netflix series called $1 Billion Code. Now, a bit of a disclaimer. There's quite a lot of information online about whether it's a factual account of the events between Google and Terra Vision and how strict they were with the information they presented. Of course, there was also the attempt to avoid litigation if they talk too much about the case. But I think the major ideas that are presented in the film can help us learn a little bit more about how to protect software and the complexities of patents for software especially. So I hope you guys enjoy this podcast episode. Thank you for subscribing, and please don't forget to subscribe to our magazine. It's just $24 for the whole year. That's 12 issues. Every month we cover a set of subjects, and you can benefit from reading and interfacing with us. Thank you for listening. So there may be some rules which prohibit me from sharing the content of the episode or the series. I think there were about 4 episodes it was on the series on Netflix. So what I'll do instead of giving you those clips is I'll give you a summary of some of the highlights as I saw them. The first, of course, is a bit of history, that these were guys from Germany. So the country was just emerging from a split between East and West. So there was quite a lot of freedom and excitement amongst the youth. The hacker culture was just being developed or coming into play. There were a lot of dynamics between Eastern thinking and Western thinking, at least in Germany. But you had a lot of creativity in the culture of these young people. So that's a bit of background in terms of what was happening in that particular point in time. So this young man comes together with his team of controversial group, and they decide to create, I think it began first like an art project. So he gets the skills or the assistance of a technical guy, and they come up with an art project. And then they realize its potential, so they approach a telco company with the idea, manage to get some funding, run into quite a number of challenges in terms of how it processes the data, because they wanted to create images from taken from above, from satellites, and create a simple mapping system. Interestingly, a lot of the work that they were doing, they only realized this later, but a lot of the work they were doing was a bit of a look into the future. In a sense, a lot of the ideas came before their time, but once the internet came into play, people realized that these ideas were going to be very useful. There's also a visit to California which helped enrich their experiences, and from which they decided to adopt some of the ideas they saw in Silicon Valley about office spaces and creativity, as well as the concept of funding and startups and venture capital, which is why they were able to approach Deutsche Telekom with the idea for funding. Now, the other thing that's interesting is one of the guys that was a bit of on the technical side, he talks about how Steve Jobs had bought the patent for a mouse and then came up with the idea of making it more affordable and giving it a lifespan of about 2 years, and then making sure that it was able to work, as he refers it, on his Levi's or on his jeans. And this is a highlight for me because in the script he calls this the difference between innovation, or the thin line between innovation and creativity, or innovation and invention. So this is a key point in the series. I think it's in the second episode, if I'm not wrong. Now, the other part that takes place that's interesting is there's a conversation between the two developers about the importance of getting a lawyer at some point when they're trying to look for partnership. There's also a point at which one of the guys they meet in California suggests that they need to start thinking like entrepreneurs, otherwise they'll be kicked out of the space once other people have their ideas. This is another thing that stands out. Incorporating or establishing a company and getting patents for the products you're building. Now, the third part is expressed in a conflict that one of the developers was facing as he was putting together the code for the system that they called at the time Terra Vision. And he was facing a challenge of processing speed, and what happened is he ends up in a hospital, and as he's throwing around the furniture out of disgust and a bit of depression, he starts cutting off the branches and realizes that if he can split up his code into small branches, then this will help in the processing, and he can process the images in smaller resolutions, and that's mentioned in I believe the second episode. And this is a discussion between the two, the artist and the coder, where there's concern about how much the coder shared with a friend whom they don't realize will later become a rival. And the discussion is about the algorithm and the complexities, and he mentions 4 important things about the design that made it unique. And this is some of what will be discussed when you come into the subject of patents, and the difficulty that I believe coders will face is you have to be able to prove or to show that the way you've built your code is unique enough to be patented. And I think the challenge we face now is there are lots of code snippets that you can utilize when you're building your code, or in our current age there's artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence I believe a lot of these models are built on other people's data. And so for decades, for years, humans have been creating code for all sorts of programs. And for you to have a tool that does this by artificial intelligence, I believe it works the same way as language models or large language models. Is you have to train the artificial intelligence to think and to process large amounts of data and to think like a coder. And so the data you use has to be supplied by someone. So at some point, all the code that's available, that's online for free, for example, has to be accessed by this tool. So one of the challenges that we're facing, for example, with chatbots and all these tools that are available that help us answer questions or draw images, is no one user was ever asked or paid for the use of their data that they provided, that these models are using, and at the end charging users just like yourself or myself to pay for in order to access. So that's a bit of a challenge, but the additional issue is now, how do you distinguish yourself or distinguish your algorithm from the other algorithms that exist out there, and who has access to those algorithms? Because by definition, these algorithms are not supposed to be out in the open unless you're part of the open source system, in which case you have a completely different philosophy about how to profit from your products. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge, and that is a challenge that you see the lawyers face in the third and fourth episodes, because they have to prove and they have to have some technical knowledge to be able to look into the code and compare the code between Terra Vision and Google, and definitively state that there has been some copying of code. And there's an interesting scene, I believe, in the fourth episode where a technical guy is let into Google offices to have a look at the source code, but you see this hugely protected building, and he walks through this almost maze-like structure followed by a security guard, and then walks into this padded room with just one computer, and he has to look at the code, take notes, and then compare that to the Terra Arthur's code, the Terra Vision's code. Now, the lawyer that was chosen for the defense of Terra Vision talked about the fact that she had come across so many cases that had been stalled because the big companies knew exactly what to say, and the cost of litigation for patent attorneys was extremely high. So it became a simple act of strategy between the law firms and the small companies, and of course an important part in the case that a loophole that she established was in the communication between the startup and the bigger company, where they stated the need for collaboration. So you might enjoy taking notes, at least for ideas on how to beef up your case or protect yourself in case you think about taking on a larger company, larger corporation for on an issue of patent infringement. And those are, I believe, some of the points that stood out. It's important, I believe, also to state that that some of the material presented in the series, in the short series, was fictional. Some of the names were changed. Not all information in the series was made available because naturally Google wanted to make sure that they were protected, and so did Netflix on the other side of the argument. So I think it's a very useful look into complex subject of copyrights, patents, trademarks, the whole subject of intellectual property. Now, one other idea that I think is a little bit interesting is I've spoken before about 4 theories that were taught to us through a course I took in 2015. These are theories that are used to define how each different country or region probably approaches the subject of intellectual property. So this is interesting and useful because you have different systems in place that either protect, for example, the creators, others that are interested in the good of all communities, others that are theories, or the theory that protects profit, or the need for the creatives to profit from their creative works. So there are 4 theories which I might present in the show notes. But this is useful because it also will help you to be able to distinguish how your country thinks about intellectual property, as well as the subject of how the law is practiced. Do they use juries, or do you have a system that's a little bit different? Now, if they have juries, as was the case with this Google versus Terra Vision case, I believe it was in 2017, the issue that came up was the subject matter was too technical. At some point you could see the frustration in the eyes of the lawyers and the people who had brought the case against Google. They used a strategy to make sure that the lawyer wasn't too much on the offensive, but the issue was that the matter that was being discussed was much too technical. Fortunately, the lawyer that took on the case had a coding background, so that helped a little bit, but that's not always going to be the case. Depending on what system your country has, some have found the benefit of using experts, filing, I suppose lawyers call them amicus briefs or amicus curiae, friends of the court, where you get an expert in intellectual property law for example, software, and you invite him to advise or to advise the court on matters that are maybe a bit too technical. But that, of course, depends on your jurisdiction. So part of your study, I suggest you look into the 4 theories. You'll also figure out what system your country uses in terms of the law. Is it a common law, whatever, 2 different systems that exist. And based on the theory that your country seems to lean towards, then you will be able to find a suitable approach for your case. Other issues, I suppose, might be international treaties. Will you find it easier to register your patent in another country because of a better system there? Or will it be easier to try your case in your own geography or in your own country? So those are some of the things that stood out with this series. Very useful and very well done, especially in its ability to highlight the complexities of software and patents. Thank you for listening. We're trying to put together some show notes and some content that will help you if you're in the East Africa region as well as South Africa, so Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And you can get in touch with us as we develop probably more materials and possibly organize some workshops or sessions where we can create a more useful curriculum and probably make better use of the guidebooks that have been created with collaboration from some international groups as well as the British, American and Kenyan and Ugandan governments and their ICT departments. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope we can get you to subscribe. That will cost you, as I said before, just $24 for 12 months if you want our magazine, Intersection Magazine. And also, if you would like to be part of this podcast, run a few ads, maybe have a conversation with us if you are interested in any of our subjects. We have amazing rates, negotiable rates, where we can feature your products, have conversations with you, and help promote your business.